Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyanat Manimayaya Bahiribhut Bhutam Yatha Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanam Evadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye. So, what we are doing at the moment is explaining what Vedanta is. What does it mean? What does it do? What does it teach? How is that different from others? This is the general topic that we are building on, because I think that once we understand that, then the rest of the teaching becomes more relevant, easier to grasp. So some time to understand the uniqueness and the quality of Vedanta itself is very useful for us to do. So the Vedic teaching, the teaching of the Vedas, is also called Shastra. Shastra. So we need to understand what Shastra means. Because in Sanskrit, all these meanings are well embedded. No words are used that don't really have a meaning. Very, very few. Most of the words have meanings that carry with them the importance, the uniqueness of those words. Shastra is not an exception. So Shastra means what? So Shastra, first of all, in the entire Vedic teaching, the utmost importance is given to Viveka. That's very fundamental to the teaching of Vedic spirituality. Viveka, discrimination. And Viveka doesn't mean just one thing, like between Atma and Anatma. It means in every field that touches on in our life, that we touch on in our lives, we need to employ Viveka. So, keeping that in mind, the word Shastra has two basic segments, two meanings, simultaneous meanings. One is called Shasanam, and the other one is called Shamsanam. So the Shasanam is primarily have to do with karma. And Shamsanam is basically talking about the teaching of knowledge. Karma versus jnanam. Okay? Let's go back to Shasanam for a minute. So even in Shasanam, by the way, we should say that this part of Vedas, even though it has some uniqueness, is fairly common to the other religious schools of thought. They all have a lot of similarity in Shasanam. So Shasanam means what is the right thing for us to do? Let's make sure that we have discrimination between good and bad, between what's useful versus what is useless, what to do, what to avoid. This is common to all religious thoughts. There are some differences. For example, in the Vedic thought, the means must be consistent with the end. This is not true of some of the other religious thoughts, especially in Islam and in the past in Christianity also. It just means that as long as the ends are kept in mind, even if you make some himsa, some violence in the means, it's okay. In Islam, of course, it is right front and center that whoever doesn't believe in their view of God should be eliminated, and it is the right thing for you to do. So there is a disparity between means and end. Not so in Hinduism. So the means are also consistent. If you have employ the wrong means, you cannot do the right end. So with that exception, more or less the Shasanam, means viveka for doing right versus wrong. This is basically Shasanam. Where Vedanta distinguishes itself from the other schools of thought, is unique in that manner, is to take viveka for jnanam to the ultimate end. You know, it's often talked about this wrongly, that science is the ultimate proof of what the truth is, and religiosity and all of this is faith-based. It's not scientific. Nothing can be farther from the truth. We feel that the science as we know it, which we have known for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, has to deal with some of the objects that we see. Atoms, molecules, how they combine together. So there also we have a lot of research and a lot of truth to talk about. And so that means there is something more than what you see in the world that you see. And so it has to do with the consciousness itself. And unless you account for it accurately, your science is very limited. It may not be wrong, but it is incomplete. This is the view of Shastra. So the Shamsanam does viveka until the very end. We have to now see, this is what we're going to be studying. What do you mean by the viveka of jnanam? None of the other schools of thought really engage themselves as well as we do in terms of analyzing the need for viveka in jnana. So this is something that we should know about. This is what Vedanta is all about. So let's list the Viveka, the many aspects of Viveka that the Shansanam, the teaching of this, talks about. We should be very familiar with it. And some of them you already know. It's very possible that you may not have thought about the others, but to look at all in one aggregate would be useful for us to do. So I will give you some examples. And I'm not sure that these are listed in importance. These are just a list. So we saw the distinction between gaining something, prapti. So Vedanta says very carefully. So basically it draws the conclusions of Viveka on things that we already know, but we don't think about it. So it draws the conclusion between the types of gain that we have in our life. This is very important, very germane to the topic. As we have seen, there are two types of gains, not just one type of gain. One is the gain of something that we don't have, and the other one is the gain of something that we already have, but we have overlooked it for one reason or the other. Apraptasya praptihi and praptasya praptihi. This is one example of viveka. We must distinguish between these two kinds. And their implications are pretty enormous. Because in the case of apraptasya praptihi, you have several things that distinguish it from praptasya praptihi. In the apraptasya praptihi, karma is the most important tool. And jnanam supports karma. If you want to go someplace, you have some idea of where, how, somewhere, where to go. But then you have to actually employ the right mechanism to get there. So this is number one. The second one is that the gain of the apraptasya prapti is based on the doer. How long does it take you to get there? Are you making any mistakes? Or how efficient you are? How dedicated you are? How much energy you have? All of these depend upon the doer. So this is what is called, I'm just revising itself, it's what is called kartrutantram. So kartrutantram means that it is based on the karta, for the doer. This characterizes apraptasya prapti. Also, one other very important thing. In the apraptasya prapti, you're always talking about something other than yourself. This is something to really think about. Why we say that? Because our goal is to know ourselves completely. Right? We've already said that really there is completeness in ourselves, but we don't know the completeness. So the very famous 10th man example comes in, that the 10th man was fine. He was okay. But he was, for some reason or the other, missing the fact that what he was looking for, he was the same person that he was looking for. So the sense of completeness was unknown to that person. This is our situation. each one of us has made an assumption that I am not okay. I lack a lot of things, and I'm not going to be happy until I do X, Y, and Z. We have a long list of things that we are always has. We go to sleep with it, we wake up to it, and the list becomes shorter and longer over time, but never goes away. So we saw that, especially in the Saturday morning class, where we saw what a mistake it is, that we are searching for ourselves outside, but the conclusion that no, all is not well for me is inside. And there is no connection between them. If searching for me outside was actually affecting my conclusion, I would at least be okay with it. But it has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. It's, there's so many examples you can give. One of the examples is that you are cleaning outside the window when the inside of the window remains dirty. And you just can't, you're not even touching it. And somehow you feel that if I just clean the outside, I'll be done. You're not. You're making a big mistake. So there we saw that my objective is to find completeness in myself. That's what is lacking. Okay, so just think about this. If I am looking for completeness on myself, am I ever going to be away from myself? That is ridiculous. I am what I am. And by doing something, I remain untouched. So my sense of incompleteness has nothing to do with doing, but to know something about myself. Why do I feel incomplete? Excuse me. So here, this is a very important thing. I think we've already talked about it, but just bears revision and emphasis. In the praptasya prapti, acquisition of the already acquired, gain of the already gained, which is myself, right? This is not karta tantram, because the karta tantram only applies to things that are different from me. But about myself, if there is an issue, what is the issue? Where am I going wrong? The answer to that question is there are two ways of recognizing something, two ways of gaining something again. One is to do and to reach some place which is other than myself, but in myself it is not based on kartratantram, but vastutantram. So follow this very carefully. For an understanding of the self, there is nothing to be done, but something to be known. Because the way it is when you do something, you can either do it this way or do it that way, or another way, or not do it at all. What is called kartum shakyam, akartum shakyam, anyatha va kartum shakyam is the Sanskrit for it. Kartum shakyam means it's possible to be done this way. Like for example, if you were to go from your house to the grocery store, you have so many ways to go there. You can take a car, you can take Uber, or if you're a bicyclist, you say, no, I think today I want to go on a bicycle. Or if it is close enough, you can even go walk. So this is what is called kartum shakyam, akartum shakyam, anyatha va kartum shakyam. Or say, I don't want to do it. That's all possible if the goal is to go to the grocery store. But if the goal is yourself, there's nothing to be done. So there, this is what is called Vastu Tantram. In the Vastu Tantram, you cannot, what Vastu Tantra means, you must know it exactly as it is. There is no option. You cannot say, I'm going to take this as a rose, or I can take it as a table, or I can take it as a cell phone. I can do anything I want. You have to take it exactly what the Vastu is, which is a rose. And anything else is a mistake. So therefore we now close the loop on this is also Viveka. This is another form of Viveka. That if there is something other than you, it becomes kartatantram. But if it is you, it cannot be kartatantram, it has to be vastutantram. Viveka. This distinction we must know. Keep in mind as we proceed further. So when we talk about Viveka, it is not just a simple Viveka. It means that there is discrimination in Jnanam from various sources. And only when we make sure that all these sources of confusion are thought about, my mind will be able to proceed further. So this is another thing. So this praptasya praptihi, vastutantram, kartrutantram, all must be very clear in our mind. Because otherwise I'm finding something that, as we will see, that it is not me. It is not me. I'm wasting my time. And so as far as finding moksha is concerned, doing something does not achieve moksha. This is what is, so this is very fundamental to the teaching of Vedanta. And it takes a long time to understand and to explain and to grasp. There are books and arguments and so on, but the simplicity of that is this. What type of prapti am I looking for? If I'm looking for something other than myself means if I'm looking for some temporary goal, like I must go here, I must do this, then doing things is appropriate. But if it is myself, then doing things doesn't help. It's like a rose. I must know the Atma exactly as it is. But the problem is that I take the Atma not exactly as it is. I don't. I take it as a limited. Atma is not limited, but I take it as limited. And not only I take it limited, I take it as a variety of limitation. Limitation of the body, limitation of the mind, limitation of connections with others, Vishaya, all kinds of limitations. So my errors are many because I'm not taking it exactly. This is Vastu Tantra. You have to take a rose to be exactly rose. And we have to see how exactly am I able to see that. And so this is a natural mistake that I make because I just don't know. As we have already said, that everyone is born totally engulfed in darkness, in ignorance. The moment the baby is born, it is engulfed in ignorance. Nothing is apparent to it. Ignorance about the world around it, ignorance about itself, who am I? Both drishya as well as drik, complete ignorance. But one by one, the ignorance of the world goes by teaching. Teaching by the parents, teaching by the class in the teachers, studying books, etc., etc. I remove my ignorance of the world. The ignorance of the self remains because there is no one that can tell me exactly what that is. You need to have a teacher. You can't do that yourself, no matter how hard you try, as we've seen. It was a very interesting example given. I've heard that example before also, but Swami Akhandanandaji reminded us. He says, there's a story of a villager who was kidnapped by some robbers. And luckily they did not kill him because they were not killers. But what they wanted to do was to take him away from his property and to rob his entire property over a period of time. This is what they wanted to do. So what they did was, they bound him up, his hands and feet and carried him to a nearby jungle, very thick jungle, populated by dangerous animals, tigers, snakes. And in the middle of the night, they left him there, totally convinced that there's no way he can find his way through. Because in a jungle, there's no signs, there's no roads, there's no left turn, right turn. It is just nothing but bushes and trees. And when he woke up in the morning, he was completely engulfed in, doesn't know what direction is right, what is left, what is west, what is east, nothing. And he wandered around, going from place to place, somehow surviving by eating leaves and fruits. And finally he saw a traveler walking close by who seemed to know exactly where they were going. And he cried for help. And he says, I'm completely lost. This is what happened. The robbers have left me in the darkness and in the jungle. And I want to go back to my village. So the person said, tell me about your village. What is the name of your village? Where are you from? So he told the name, etc. So this person said, aha, I think I know how to go there. Here's what you do. I can't go there with you because that's too far. That's not the direction I'm going. But I'm pretty sure I can show you the direction that you should go. So here's what you do. He drew some figures on the earth because there was no paper or pencil. So he says, okay, all right, this is where you are. This direction is the west. Okay, that direction. Got it? Okay. This is east. You have to go southeast. So this is the way you need to go. And you keep going this way until you cross the end of the jungle. And from there on, you can tell that there are paths and you'll cross a river also. He gave him all the directions and said, I think you're going to be okay. Good luck to you. Swami Akhandananda, and in fact this is a very important example given. This applies to us. Exactly. Why? Because we know exactly how to negotiate within the samsara, within the jagat. But where I really want to go is complete freedom. And I've been left in the middle of that. And I need to know how to get there. So what needs to happen is a viveka has to be done in the form of drawing a diagram, saying this is where you need to do, this is what you need to do, and if you do that, you're going to reach where you'll be awake, you'll wake up. It's a different kind of a journey because it's a journey of the self. You don't have to, it's not apraptasya prapti, it's praptasya prapti. But that also needs to be corrected because I am lost. So here, the next thing to look at is another kind of viveka. Also, it's a very important viveka. And this is the viveka between experience and knowledge. Viveka between experience and knowledge. So in the Saturday class, in I think last few classes ago, I had talked about Swami Dayanandaji's book on Introduction to Vedanta, where this topic was discussed. So I'll summarize it in case you have not seen it or you're already familiar with it, but just to remind you of it. So in the Viveka, in the Shastra, we ask the students to understand the difference between experience and knowledge. They are two different things. So the example given to everyone to understand is that of the rising sun. So the rising sun is an experience because this ball of fire seems to come out of nowhere and appear in the sky, lighting everything else up. And that's how the dawn of the day begins. This is an experience that everyone has, whether it's a 3-year-old or a 30-year-old, you have the same experience. So now, given that example, experience can be with knowledge or without knowledge. Knowledge always includes experience. An experience with knowledge doesn't mean that it can disappear. It can continue to be, even though the knowledge says the experience is false. All of this is encapsulated in the rising sun. So as you grow up, you realize that really the sun doesn't rise, the earth moves. The sun staying right where it is, it appears as though the sun is rising, but it is not. Once this knowledge is clear, you can still have the experience of the rising sun, even though that you know that it is a false experience, isn't it? So the experience and knowledge are not mutually exclusive, but they are two different things. So one is, experience is a function of the sense organs, and knowledge is a function of the mind and buddhi. So the two, when mixed up, so in the case of a youngster who doesn't understand that the sun doesn't rise, it looks like a pure experience. But in the case of an older person, the experience is not taken away, but a new light is shown on the experience. And the experience can continue on. You and I am very fond of the Suryodaya in the morning. I do my Gayatri Mantra 3 times every time I see the sun. And even though I see that it is not the sun rising, it's the earth moving, but it doesn't make any difference to me. I enjoy it. This is an important viveka. We have listed the kinds of viveka. This is also a kind of a viveka that we must know about. And that's the viveka between an experience and knowledge. Okay? Then there is another viveka that Shastra points out, and this is exemplified between a role and an actor. Role of a play that has a very specific plot. There is a story, and there is the roles that employ peculiar clothing, all of those kinds of things. And so that's a role. And an actor that plays the role. So again, in this case, we can see that the role must have an actor. There can be no role without an actor. But the actor doesn't have to always be with the role. It can be playing a role, or it can be independent of the role. Not the other way around. The role has to have an actor. So the actor and role are not mutually exclusive, but they have a different relationship. And if the actor, for some reason, does not know that he or she is an actor, like it can happen if you are drunk or you're under drugs, something like that, where you forget. Actually, you always begin with an actor. But it's very possible that in the middle of acting, you had so much to drink that you keep forgetting your own identity. You're just doing, just participating in the play. But usually, the relationship of an actor to a role requires a very simple viveka. You know who you are. And if there is some problem with the role, you say that's part of the role. It doesn't have nothing to do with me. If you don't, you've got an issue. Swami Dayanandji, I remember, was once telling us a story that, he says, I sometimes think about it. What if there is a visit from people from another planet in a UFO? I remember seeing this movie. I think you may have seen it also when I was a youngster. I forget the name of it. I think it said, "The day the earth stood still." And I still remember scenes from it, even though it must have been 60, 70 years ago. A deeply impressive movie. So, science fiction movies can be very interesting to see. So in this episode, there is a UFO that lands on the earth, and it is visited by a person from another planet. And on that planet, imagine, almost all people there are jnanis. They are knowledgeable about who they are. They have already been taught who they are and what role they are playing. That's very clear to them. So in this UFO, this person lands on the earth and starts to be welcomed by the people around, gets to interact with them, has some experience, spends some time observing them, talking to them, observing their behavior, their interaction with each other. All of this is going on. So one day, there is a communication between this extraterrestrial person and their own friends in the other planet that they came from. So there's a special phone call or something. So there are people there are asking, so what do you think about the earth? And more importantly, what do you think about the earthlings who live there? So he says to them, do you know something? Almost none of them know who they are. And they cannot do the viveka between who they are as an actor and the role that they're playing in their life. So this other person says, what? How can they function? Tell us how they behave. I can't even visualize that. He says, trust me, I'm in exactly the same boat as you. He said, they are crazy. Crazy people. Why? Because, in the case of someone playing a role, you will play the role, and then after the script is done, you're taking some rest. Both you and the person that you were fighting, you were enemies in the role, they both go to the coffee shop and they share a coffee and they congratulate each other and said, wow, you did such a good job. I think you slapped me a little too hard, but that's okay. He says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, how are things? How are your children? And they relax and they say, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Is what happens. So this other extraterrestrial person says, okay, but what do they do? He says they do not have a rest period. Rest period. In fact, the only rest period is they go to sleep. When then they go back, they are still enemies to each other. They don't forgive anybody else. They don't feel this is a role. They have no idea about that. And they just go on and on, building up on their previous experience and making it worse, and get confused in the process, and they're always fighting, and they don't really have any real peace. So this other person said, oh my God, I cannot visualize. He says, it must seem crazy to you. He says, absolutely. I can't wait to get out of this place. He says, these guys are absolutely mad. They cannot distinguish reality from the roles, and they make a mess of their lives, and that's how they do at the end of the life, then they take a birth again, the whole thing starts again. This is the scenario. It is all because we have not thought about the viveka between my role and myself. I'm playing a role. Who is playing the role? Does the role touch the actor? This viveka I cannot do, because I am completely mixed up between, it's interesting. Another way to look at this is, Swami Dayananda used to say that. He says, there are things that are happening changing, happening. Happening is a good word in there. Things happen. We asked, what happened? So happening is going on completely all the time. But there is someone that doesn't happen. It's a very interesting thing. We only think that what doesn't happen must not be there, isn't it? If something can fundamentally not happen, then it must not even be there. Complete absence of something. But if something is there by its very nature, it is happening. But there is one thing which is, there's one vastu, one entity, which is very much there, but it doesn't happen. There's only one thing that doesn't happen. There is only one thing that is, but doesn't happen. You see the distinction? This is a very interesting thing to see. In fact, this is what happened to my Kena Upanishad book. I should always keep a copy of that because I keep forgetting the exact. Kena Upanishad says this. He says, Vidita aviditat adhi. I think you can look that up. I have to look at the exact verse and the full verse. This is an important verse. This is why I say that I think Kena Upanishad is a short but a very, very revealing. It just gives the crux of it. I haven't seen the book by Swami Akhandananda on the Kena Upanishad, but I recommend it to a couple of you that just came back from India to get it. In fact, I wouldn't mind looking at it myself, but I can almost visualize what he would say. So there, Kena Upanishad says that in the answer to the question, by whom things are happening. It's kind of like one example of that is that there is a huge magnet. Sorry. Huge magnet. And the magnet is not happening. It just sits there. But because of the magnet, things are happening. So the Atma, Kena Upanishad says, he says, Vidita aviditat adhi. Beautiful verse. He says it is different from vidita. Vidita means known. So for example, this is a glass which is known. I can see it. It's called vidita. So Atma is not vidita. It's not vidita. It's not an object that you can see. That's yourself. In fact, this is where the mistake we make because of the lack of viveka. And I'll come to that in a minute. But Atma is not vidita. Okay, if Atma is not vidita, means it must be there somewhere. Same thing with Paramatma, Ishvara. He must be around there somewhere, I can see. And says, no. So this is true for Paramatma and the Atma, Jivatma. Both are the same. It is not something which is happening. It is not something which is there. You cannot cognize it. You cannot see it. So if there is something which can never be cognized, then it means that it must not be there. Because the lakshana for something must be that it must be there. Either I should be able to see it or somebody else should be able to see it. It must be visible by someone. And if it is not cognized by any one possible thing, then it must not be there. Because it is shunya. It is zero. No, it is not zero. So this is what is called vidita, avidita, adhi. So adhi means it is different from both of them. So that is what is talked about as the Atma. And the Atma which is there, but like a magnet, a very powerful magnet. But at least on the magnet you can see the magnet. Here it is you, the person, that things are happening to you, but you don't happen. In fact, you don't, at least in the case of magnet, things cling to it, touch it. Here, there is no clinging, no touching, but there is an appearance of touching. So here, this is what I was saying a little bit earlier, that I will talk a little bit more about that. Here's the issue. You see, I have to take myself to be someone, isn't it? Because it cannot be that I cannot see myself, therefore I must not be there. That's not acceptable to me. It cannot be acceptable to any reasonable person. It's not that I'm not there. In fact, it is just the opposite. You know, Swami Dayananji used to say that. He said, you know, what is the most common desire of all human beings is? If there's one thing that is common to every human being, regardless of any shape, change, age, gender, anything, what is common to everyone? And Swami then you should just say, you know what it is? It is the fact that I am someone. I am a significant being. And I don't have to be very significant, but I never want to be insignificant. That is not acceptable to me. Like, we can talk about this in different ways. One of the biggest opposites to that is the thing that everyone dislikes the most. See, this is what likes the most. But if you look at what one dislikes the most, it is rejection of any kind. intolerable to human beings, that any kind of a rejection. And let's go back to the other ones, the significance. So very simple, that supposing you, there's some people that are talking about something, and you may not be a very important person, but you have something to say, and people ignore you. That, there's nothing much about this person. And you want to say something and they somehow ignore you. That bothers everyone most. Hey, that is a sign of the fact that I may not be the most significant person there is, like Donald Trump, but at least I have some significance. Don't ignore that. This is the common desire for everybody. So a lack of rejection and a finding of significance. So this is important. But here's where I make the mistake, and I think we'll have to postpone. I remember last time telling you that we have talked all about the anatma, all the 8 things, anivasi, anirvachaniya, vinashi, all those kinds of things. And I said we'll go to the other one, which is the self, but we'll have to postpone one more class. But here's what happens. And this goes back to the Vastu Tantram. I need to know exactly as I am. And if I knew exactly what I am, my problems are over. The whole thing just disappears as an importance. In other words, if I know that I'm the actor, not the role, then it doesn't matter what the role is. But what happens is that in my self-ignorance, the fact that I am a non-happening person like a magnet, but very much there, I have to take myself to be someone. Right? This is what I was saying earlier when we went into this significance and rejection. I take myself to be someone. But what I take myself to be is my feelings in my mind. See, this is the thing. When you say, who are you, how are you, what are you, you look at the state of your mind, and that's who you are. You'll say, how are you today? This is what common thing is. You just ask yourself, or somebody asks you, how are you today? How are you? I don't know, I'm a little disappointed. You're disappointed? Yeah, I was hoping to do this, that, or the other. It didn't happen, so I'm disappointed. How do you know you're disappointed? Because there's a state of my mind which shows disappointment, right? Because you're not lying, you're telling the truth. But that truth is a reflection, is a definition of what the state of your mind is. And your mind says, I don't like it. This should have happened. And person said he's going to call today, but he didn't call. I think there is something wrong with this whole picture. Is the mind saying. So you ask, how are you feeling today? I'm very disappointed. How do you know you're disappointed? Because I feel it. How do you feel it? Because I see my mind. I'm aware of the fact that my mind is disappointed. Okay, now we are getting somewhere. You are not disappointed yourself, you are aware of the fact that your mind is disappointed, isn't it? So the person says, you're just making too much of a small thing. I am disappointed. What else do you want? My mind is me. So this is where the problem comes in, where this is not Vastu Tantram. It is exactly like saying instead of a rose, this is some other flower. You know, it's a Mexican sage. We have some beautiful. It's not like rose, but anyway, it is some other flower. If it is rose, then it has to be seen exactly as rose. If you think this is the Atma, then you know exactly this is the Atma. Oh, no, but I don't know about my Atma or business. All I know is I don't want to be disappointed. I know you don't want to be disappointed, but look at this Viveka. Without the Viveka, you cannot gain the Vastu that you want. This is what you need to do. And there we see that the Vastu has to be defined, pointed out as something that I'm completely ignoring. I'm misusing it. I'm unaware of the purity of it, the enormity of it, the importance of it. I'm ignorant of that. I'm just using it as my consciousness, misusing it. So this is the Vastu that I need to know. And like that person who shows the way out of the jungle into the village, someone has to tell me, where am I making a mistake? I'm lost. Because I'm flitting from either being disappointment or I'm very happy. One thing or the other, I'm always doing it. That's a role. That's not the actor. So we'll continue with this analysis, but in short, again, to summarize, the nature of Vedanta, Vedas in general, but Vedanta in particular, is that it's a Shastra, and the Vedanta is the Shansalam of the Shastra, and the Karmakanda is the Shasanam of the Vedas, of the Shastra. And what characterizes both of them is very careful viveka between things that confuse me. Between the actor in the role, between the knowledge and experience, between drik and drishya, between praptasya praptihi, apraptasya praptihi. So we should look at it as a way out by looking at Atma Vichara, by looking at Viveka as the basis of my journey towards discovering myself. So we would continue this analysis in the next week. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Good to see you all. This is a new name that I'm not familiar with. Benjamin Robert. If you could send me some information about yourself, that'd be good. Just to send an email to vijaykapoor@gmail.com. All right, good to see you all. We'll see you next week. Hari Om.